let's talk about where to get started on Code School so you can pick the technology that most interests you. As you may know, web applications are made up of multiple pieces. HTML gives structure to web pages, while CSS tells the browser how to visually display the HTML. Add in JavaScript and you can create interactive web pages with built-in behaviors, which create better user experiences. But these web pages need to be delivered from a server and sometimes dynamically generated. This is where languages like Ruby and frameworks like Ruby on Rails come in. They're the backend of our websites. These same Ruby backends can be programmed to interface with iPhone apps, which are programmed using the language Objective-C. Now that you have an overview of how things stick together, let's take a deeper dive into each Code School path, starting with the HTML and CSS path. This brings together the two languages you need to build and design web pages. We jump in running on this path, assuming you already have a basis in HTML and CSS that can get you started with our Front-End Foundations course, before you move on to learn CSS best practices in our CSS cross-country course. To get the most out of your CSS, try our Fundamentals of Design course and learn the basic design principles that can improve the appearance of your websites. This path will also show you how to create mobile-friendly web pages with our Journey into Mobile course, or take on the Sass language in our Assembling Sass course to extend and add additional functionality to your CSS. JavaScript is the language that adds behavior to your HTML and CSS, and we start out this path with a 3-part JavaScript road trip course which teaches you all the basics. If you've already got JavaScript down, dig into our 2-part jQuery course where you can create highly interactive web pages. Or if you're looking to better organize your JavaScript code, check out one of our framework courses like Backbone.js, Ember.js, or Angular.js. These frameworks help keep your code more modular and organized. The Ruby language was built for programmer happiness. It's not often that you hear about a programming language built with happiness in mind. And our Ruby path starts with Try Ruby to give you a taste of the language before moving on to Ruby Bits 1 and 2. If you're ready to jump in and start building websites, definitely check out our Rails for Zombies series. It takes you from the basics into testing with Rails and even building an API with Rails. If you want to learn how to build applications on your iPhone, there's a path for that. The iOS path starts by teaching you the basics of the Objective-C language in our course, Try Objective-C. You'll then move on to our Try iOS course, followed by learning how to add models and maps to your iOS apps, and learning the features introduced in iOS 7. Lastly, our electives path will give you a sample platter of multiple technologies, including a bunch of Git courses. Git is a leading version control system that makes it easy to have multiple people working on the same codebase at the same time. Electives also allow you to give the R programming language a shot, or to get comfortable with Chrome DevTools, the best way to debug web pages right there in your browser. Now that you've had a tour of Code School paths, hopefully you know where you're going. Every time you complete a course, you're going to earn a badge. And when you complete all of the courses in a path, you'll earn the Path Master Badge. Hopefully you get there one day. Good luck and have fun learning by doing.
In 1980, Tim wrote Clarkson invented the idea of hyperlinks in turn. In 1990, Robert joined a document that charted, and that's pretty much how the whole World Wide Web started. They defined some markup code called HTML, which paved the way for style sheets to decorate as well. Navigate through URLs to internet locations. You can learn it all with Front-End Foundations.
You're watching Front-End Foundations. I'm John Friskus, and in this course we're going to learn how to build a basic web page. To do this, we're going to learn HTML and CSS. We're going to write HTML text tags and use CSS selectors. We're going to learn how to lay out a web page that has multiple sections and multiple pages. We're going to work with images on that web page. And finally, we're going to learn how to customize fonts and build HTML forms. Now, once you've completed all the challenges in this course, you'll earn the course badge. If you're already pretty familiar with HTML and CSS, you might consider skipping ahead to the challenges so you can earn that badge. Before we dive into some code, let's look at a short history of the web and its creator, Tim Berners-Lee. In the early 80s, Tim worked for a group called CERN, where he proposed a better way for researchers to share and read documents. You know, CERN, you probably know that better now as the people who run the Large Hadron Collider. In 1984, he built a system that he called Enquire, which took a series of cards, or documents, and linked them together with things called hyperlinks. Now, it was a really cool system for the time, but it was only being used by researchers internally. So he had an idea that he could take this system and make it available to the entire world. So with Robert Kalau, he wrote a proposal in 1990 for the creation of what became the World Wide Web. This is actually the World Wide Web's first logo. It's come a long way since then. Like Enquire, the web links together documents called web pages with hyperlinks. And the language of building a web page is called HTML. HTML allows you to take a plain text document written in any simple text editor and organize it into lists, link to other web pages, include images, and more. You might be wondering what the letters in HTML stand for. They stand for Hypertext Markup Language. Now, hypertext is really just a fancy way of saying text that has some enhanced capabilities, like the ability to be interactive. And markup language, which literally means you can mark up different sections of your page as lists, links, and even do things like specify attributes and change the font sizes, for example. When we write HTML, we put it inside of a file, and we always make sure that the extension for that file is .html. And that lets our web browser know to display that markup properly. So a web browser is really just an HTML reader. The browser takes in some HTML and knows how to display that markup language properly on the screen for you. And hopefully that markup is displayed the same no matter which browser you use. At least that's the idea. In this course, we'll be showing you HTML code, CSS code, and the way that the browser displays them. So keep an eye out for these symbols so you always know the type of content that you're looking at. The site that we'll be building in these videos is called Recipe World. It's a multi-page site that has a homepage, a list of recipes, an individual recipe page with directions and ingredients, and even a Suggest a Recipe page. We're going to start by building out the recipe page. Now, before you build any web page, you always have to figure out what content you're going to display on it. And a good way to start that is to figure out what the main sections of content are going to be. So here we know we're going to have a page title, Recipe World. We know we're going to have the name of our recipe, Magic Cake. And we're going to have a section for ingredients and directions. The way you write HTML is with something called a tag. And most tags have opening and closing versions, and content goes in between those opening and closing tags. Here we've put some content, which is the title of the page, Recipe World, inside of an H1 tag. You can see that we first open the tag, we put our content next, and then we close the tag by writing the tag name but putting a slash before the name that appears. And this is how that will display in the browser. H1 is just one of many HTML tags, and we'll be looking at a bunch of them in this course. Don't worry about memorizing every single tag right now, because you'll always be able to refer to a list of them later on. H1 is part of a group of tags called heading tags. And heading tags are used whenever you want to declare the title of a section of content on your page. Generally speaking, the lower the H number, the more important the content is for that page. So you'll usually see things like a page title or company name inside of an H1 tag, the main subject or idea of the page in an H2 tag. Here, it's Magic Cake, the name of the recipe the rest of the page will be about. And then H3 through H6 are used to further organize some of the lesser important content on the page. Here on our recipe page, It's going to be the ingredients and the directions for combining those ingredients. When we display this in the browser, you'll notice that the H1 tag is naturally displayed bigger than the H2 and H3. And the H3 is smaller than the H1 and H2. Next, we'll add a description of our recipe. Now, anytime that you have text content on the page that's not part of one of the headers, it usually goes inside of a paragraph tag, which is written with a P. The name's a little misleading. You don't have to only put paragraphs in there. Even if you only have a few words to add that aren't part of a section title, you should put them in a paragraph tag. If you need to display a list of things, you can use an unordered list tag. Now, with an unordered list, each item in the list also has to be inside of an LI tag, or list item tag. Now you'll notice that this is the first time we've had a tag that contains another tag. Before we just had an opening tag, some text, and then a closing tag. But here, in between the open and close UL tags, we've got a couple other tags that are opening and closing inside of there. This is called nesting tags. And when you have a tag like LI that's inside of a UL tag, the UL is called the parent tag, and the LI is called the child, because the LI is inside of the UL. Indenting your code is a great way to see which tags are nested inside of others. Anytime you have a tag that's nested, you put either 2 spaces or a tab so you can really easily scan the page and see which tags are inside of others. Here's an example of how not to write nested tags. This is technically valid HTML, but it's pretty hard to just look at really quick and determine that these LIs are inside of a UL tag. So stick with indenting your tags. Our list of ingredients was an unordered list because it didn't need to appear in any specific order. But if you do need items to appear in a specific order, like in the case of directions for making this cake, you can use an ordered list tag. Ordered lists work just like unordered list, but the tag name is OL instead of UL. Here's what that list looks like in the browser. Ordered lists will naturally number each one of the list items because they need to be followed in a certain order. We're making great progress on our page and we've got all of our content marked up, but there's a few additional tags that we'll need to wrap everything in to make a truly standards compliant HTML page. So the first is body. All of the visible content on your page should be wrapped inside of a body tag so that the body is the parent of all of that content. Body doesn't actually display anything or change the way things are displayed, but it just helps keep the page content organized and helps the browser understand that that's the stuff that it really should be showing. Any code that has to be run before the page displays goes inside of the head tag. We don't actually have anything to put inside of this tag yet, but we'll eventually use it to load other useful scripts like CSS and even JavaScript. So we'll add it to our page right now so it's ready for later. Then we'll want to go one step further and take everything in our head and body tags and make them children of a single HTML tag. There's always only one HTML tag on a page, and like head and body, it doesn't really change the way anything looks, but it just helps keep all of your content organized so the browser can display it in the best way possible. Notice too that as we build out this final structure of our HTML page, we're keeping those indentations accurate. So we can easily see that head and body are children of the HTML tag, and our H1s and paragraphs and lists are also still children of body. So the final cherry on the top of our HTML cake is the doctype. The doctype sets the version of HTML that the browser should use to display the HTML that you wrote. By writing doctype HTML and not specifying a version number, we're actually just telling the browser to use the latest version. If we go back to the browser and look at the page we've created so far, you can see that we're off to a good start. So now it's your turn to practice writing HTML in the challenges.